Hey there, good afternoon. It's 2:51 p.m. It is Sunday, May 11th, and I am going to just be outright, and just come out and say it. I have not been feeling like, I've been very energetic in the last few days. And of course, it's the weekend, you know. I'm working on my project, but I have not done any, what do you call it, narrating of it. And, I feel bad because I wish I had more enthusiasm, but like I said, I've dealt with people messing with my work, people trying to claim credit for my work, people trying to block me, and the people that I'm referring to, of course, is Rex Laverne and my biological mother, who has no legal rights over me. But I know I've heard things like similar stories about this sort of stuff happening to other people in the past. I just never realized that people were so. I would say this experience of being gang stalked and finding out all these shocking things, and I've mentioned it before, how I have always had my little suspicions about people and their lack of morals, but, it is just outright shocking, what people are willing to do. And yeah, I'm disturbed. I'm very disturbed by what happened. But anyway, it has, the more I think about what happened, I start asking myself questions, right? And it's these questions that prevent me from really digging into my project because there's so much for my brain to process. Every single time I find something out new, then my brain starts thinking, okay, well, what about this time? I remember something like this. I remember something like this. Today I woke up and I started up on, I picked up where I left off on the alien spread that I'm creating, and I had mentioned this before. And the reason why I'm looking into aliens is because, I had mentioned in one of my newsletters about how um, religion played a role in my targeting. And when I'm, as we observe people, different kinds of people, we can understand. I had did a video on gods of people in different cultures. Some of these gods, I guess, when you really think about it, would be considered to be aliens, right? And I had mentioned, delving more into the alien races, and talking and being able to explain them more. But then I thought, it'd be a good idea if I created a spread to try to help people identify what alien race that they came from. And not only the alien race, to try to get some sort of idea as to what time they existed. And then also get, like, additional messages that would relate to being here. So anyway, I'm working on that. And there were certain things that flashed through my mind as I was creating this, because I realized just how old I really am, and I find this fascinating. I mean, thousands and thousands of years, right? So I'm going to be putting this. Hopefully, I might add it into the spread, into the new newsletter. I'm thinking I probably will. But like I said, I realized that I need to get out of my house, because I'm really struggling to find motivation in my house, because of the condition that it's in. And I can only do so much or get so much energy in my bedroom. And given the fact that I've dealt with a lot of depressive issues relating to my gang stalking and the issue overall, okay, because it's extremely exhausting. Most people would have just given up by now. You know what I mean? But I am somebody who has to keep going, and I try to take responsibility for myself, and this is all I've ever tried to do. But I didn't realize, how complex, and entangled I was into this web of gang stalking and the human trafficking, and then coming to find out, in the last few months, about Rex Laverne's involvement, and me just coming to find out that my biological mother, played a huge part in this. Now, I had mentioned before, that I am over the age of 18, and see, this is why I'm trying to give people a little bit more explanation, because I was dealing with people who were extremely ignorant. Okay, some people have never they were never educated on how to behave outside of their home. Maybe they were highly religiously indoctrinated, and that may be the only lessons that they've received when they went to regular school. Because most kids go to like church, right? And they go to regular school, okay? And given the fact that I would say Rex Laverne, he and I are about the same age. We're both in our early 50s or whatever. So I understand, even though I didn't go to church consistently as a kid. I do remember the times when we did, and I remember it was like Saturday we were off from school, and then Sunday morning we'd go to church, okay? And maybe his religious indoctrination was very, very strong, you know what I mean? So this is where he got his morals from. Like, this is how he saw women. This is what he thought was the right thing to do. Everything that these people, and maybe he saw it from a very strong male perspective, meaning not being able to understand that, yes, sometimes women get into situations where they have to protect themselves, whatever, okay? And then I know that he was, very closely associated with, white nationalist type ideas, okay? But apparently, from what I'm understanding, is that, I don't want to call her my mother, but she is my biological mother. I am referring to Diana Ross. Diana Ross comes out of the woodwork, and it could have been the fact that because I was spotlighted with the apparition. I'm trying to figure out exactly what happened because I'm still dealing with trauma from finding out that this woman did what she did, right? And this is another issue that kept me from really digging in, just going ahead and narrating my video project and everything. This right here, I'm disturbed by it, okay? I'm disturbed by it, okay? All right, so we have these two people. Now, this man sees things from the perspective of his religion, and religions that perhaps maybe obviously didn't think very much of people of other races, didn't think much of women, right? Didn't think that because he probably came from a time where women were, reliant on their husbands. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, because I understand things like employment law, there was a time back I would say in the 1970s, right, where women did not have the ability to go get a job without permission from their husbands. This was, and laws literally had to be changed in order to accommodate women, right? But laws have changed since then, okay? And we still have people who still think on this religious idea and these sort of thoughts, right? Women had to get permission to get a job. Women could not have their own bank account without having their husband sign for it, okay? So things were very, very oppressive for women, okay? So a lot of times, people talk about, they call it the good old days, they talk about the old people who seem to have these great marriages and things were so much better back then. They always say things like this, but they don't ever think about, well, maybe the woman had no other choice. Maybe she had no other choice, okay? And there's a lot of women who ended up getting battered, beaten, had no place to go, whatever, okay? But anyway, this was Rex Laverne's idea. This is what he was normal to him. So, he was, and because he had what they call apocalyptic delusions, he believed that he was above the law. I mean, he's a business owner, which gave him like this, this little chip on his shoulder. And then the fact that he thought that he belonged to like the ultimate religion, the ultimate, pathway to God. This is a lot of arrogance that comes along with that sort of religious thinking. So he's thinking he had the right, and him and Diana Ross were collaborating and unfortunately did something that they should not have done. Okay. So I'm sitting here making all these videos, all these years, talking about, me trying to find a job, when I couldn't find a job back in 2023 during the Justin Hayward time, where they were trying to push Justin Hayward on me, and then knowing that I was, working on creating videos, content, so that I can get paid through Patreon and Ko-fi. Then we have these two thieves that were completely ignoring me, didn't care, and ended up taking my stuff. And then their excuses were very shocking to me because obviously I'm over the age of 18. Okay. And the fact that, this woman who gave birth to me through an underground crime syndicate, might I add, right? This woman who gives birth to me never did anything for me. I never asked her for anything. So it's this sense of entitlement that I was talking about. How people I was talking about in my video that I just recently placed. I think I called it, yeah, religious delusions. Is that, people start experiencing things like cognitive dissonance. They start thinking, or trying to find reasons to justify why they don't have to feel guilty about taking from me. Okay. And her mind's like, oh, well, it's because she's not a Christian. Oh, it's because, well, she'll be okay. She can go out and get a job. Like I said, if I made millions of dollars and I was able to retire early, not have to worry about, getting up cold mornings as I'm getting older, blah, blah, blah. We all know the older you get, the more difficult, you've got more things more hurdles, more whatever. But she took that opportunity from me. A woman who did not raise me. I haven't heard, and she's never really spoken to me. You know what I mean? But she was willing. And see, this is why I'm dealing with my trauma. Okay, on a Sunday, right? And so yeah, I mean, it bothers me. But what I wanted to say is, like, when I think about how evil people are, and I understand people are, they're very immoral. Okay, I'm shocked that they had the participation of these platforms that were willing to do it, because explaining to this person, oh, she's using her name probably. I'm Diana Ross, and that's my daughter. That's not illegal. A legal explanation. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who you are. Okay, I'm 18 years old. I mean, over the age of 18 years old. That is mine, and she is not my mother legally. Okay, legally, my mother was Mary Gordon. So it's these things that, and even if my mom was my legal mom when I was a minor, Mary Gordon does not speak for me as an adult. And see, this is what I'm talking about. Is like, you have these people who, willingly helped these people do what they did because they were ignorant, and they were impressed maybe by her having a name, and then also the fact that they were religiously indoctrinated, which is explosive. We have so many targeted individuals, or what they call people, victims of human trafficking. And I had made videos a while ago talking about, gang stalking, explaining what that is, and then explaining what human trafficking is. Well, a lot of the same tactics that are used in human trafficking is also used for gang stalking. I would say that human trafficking has elements of gang stalking, okay? Sometimes people take an interest in maybe someone in the neighborhood, or maybe there's a student at school, and maybe, they start gossiping about this particular person. So they might tell some other kids who go to another school, and so sooner or later, this person finds himself the center of attention on social media, blah, 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 blah. But they're not necessarily looking to traffic her life. Like, for example, they're manipulating her employment and things that are not important, or whatever. But still, gang stalking, human trafficking still is a very dangerous game to play. And it's not like these people were not warned. Okay, Rex Laverne heard my videos, Diana Ross heard my videos, so I don't have any sympathy for them. Okay, and the mental effects of, and I can't say that I'm betrayed by Diana Ross. The reason why is because I never had any expectations of her. I don't know her. When I say I don't know her, yes, I remember seeing her on TV. I remember seeing her on movies. I remember singing along with her songs. You know what I mean? I remember her being recognized as somebody who sang for Motown or whatever, and having brief conversations, or hearing my mom. She was just like any other celebrity growing up, okay? But I don't know her. Like, I don't know what her favorite color is. I don't know any of that. All I know is that she must be a very immoral person to do what she just did. Okay? And see, this is what I'm talking about. It's like, people do not understand what their rights are. They do not know how to, decipher whether or not they were making a good decision. This was a catastrophe for so many people. So many people. Okay? I am going to say that the people who are behind Rex, I think everybody has a problem with understanding how to behave, how to be polite, what is legal. You know what I mean? And this is not telling people how to act. It's basically saying, the reason why I'm listing the laws and the penal codes in the moral reset is, if you see that, you can click on the link and it's going to take you to another page, okay? And it's going to show you, the penal code, and it's going to explain it to you and certain circumstances and all this other stuff. It's going to be very, very detailed, right? And I'm getting this directly off of the website. I'm just, adding the links so you can find it yourself, okay? But if you see something that's, I'm talking about legal terms, then you see that little thing where you can go click on that page, right? That should let you know that that's something you don't want to do. And if you do that, well, then there's going to be a consequence for it. I'm trying to encourage law enforcement to be more proactive, on these things and be able to identify it. If we live in an ignorant society, law enforcement may not know what constitutes an arrest. It could be their arrest could be based on something emotional or something that they think warrants arrest. People have to understand what is clearly defined, what is something that is, a danger to other people or a danger to oneself, and determine whether or not, and that's what it is. It's things that put people in danger, either of their property or whatever, you know what I mean? And I'm trying to inform people of that. And I understand, the people that I've encountered, I will tell you, the work environments that I've encountered, I had to deal with. It is shocking. I'm very shocked at the work environments that I had to work in, and the unprofessionalism, and then what ended up being an outright crime. Okay, an outright crime. The last where I left off on my project is I was talking about the different forms of harassment, right? And I'm talking about, and I'm just not only talking about it to inform my audience, but I'm talking about it because these things have happened to me. These things have happened to me. I've dealt with cyberbullying, okay? I've dealt with sexual harassment. I've dealt with racial harassment, which is considered just like, a verbal form of harassment, or it could also be considered, verbal harassment or whatever. I've dealt with all kinds of harassment, cyber harassment, physical. I haven't really dealt with physical harassment, but I'm listing it anyway because I want to be as thorough as I possibly can. And I'm adding the penal codes, okay? And when it comes to the cyber harassment, I realize, you can also be considered, this is also considered like, a federal crime as well, because think about it, if you're sitting here talking and spreading gossip, not just in the state of California, but if it crosses state lines, like, oh, okay, the gossip's spreading over in Arizona, now it's over in New Mexico, now it's all the way on the other side of the United States, blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to get people to understand that these things, there are consequences, so law enforcement needs to get on board with this. Okay, instead of things just letting things like pile up to where everybody's scared and we have this human trafficking problem. If I do get the intuitive feeling that there's people who are taking proactive measures to make sure that their workplaces are being they're getting rid of people who have any sort of dual affiliations, people who have been known to be talking about other people or trying to participate or get other people to participate in things like gang stalking and human trafficking. These people are being encouraged to be turned in. Okay, why? Because this cannot stay in there. This is obviously a form of terrorism. If people understand what is going on, then they need to report that. Okay, there cannot be dual affiliations, and say that you're a workplace and say that you stand for one set of principles, but yet you're promoting another. Okay, and this is exactly one of the issues that got me into this bullshit, because we had people who were working for Rex Laverne and working for Diana Ross and doing these sort of things, like putting me in situations that made me feel uncomfortable, or the gossip, or the staring, or the childish behavior and I'm going to tell you, the unprofessionalism is just it's unspeakable. Especially by people that I don't even know these people, really. I mean, I don't. Like, the whole thing with Rex Laverne and these two getting along and working together, she was basically helping him promote his Nazism. And the message that I get from Diana Ross is that, she was very, she basically was assisting in just kind of just doing what she had. She didn't mind being a Judas, because she would do whatever she needed to do in order to get by. And see, this is what I'm talking about. People who have no morals. They don't have any conscience. They don't care if they have to literally slave out something. There's some people who have a conscience, meaning they don't feel right about doing things that they know causes pain to other people. Okay, there are some people who don't want to buy, like, things that are made in, over in foreign countries where kids have to work in sweatshops. You know why? Because they feel like in some way, okay, in some way they're promoting that, right? They feel like that in some way they're kind of promoting that. And but in this case, okay, here we have a woman who gave birth to me, right? And then I was raised by other people. Okay, I was raised by other people. She wasn't there for me when I was growing up or anything, but when I'm somebody that she wants to basically steal from because now she sees that I'm worth something. You see what I'm saying? And see, we already know that there's no such thing as unconditional love that I could possibly get from this particular person. So, why in the world would I even want to know her? Okay? To me, I look at this person as an abomination, is what I look at her. Just like Rex Laverne. And, it's unfortunate, I would love to be able to say, I had great parents, like, I had a great mom, blah, 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 but, this is what life has handed me. I was the daughter of I've been exploited by my own mother. You know what I mean? And that's crazy. It just seems so crazy. But the weird part is like, my real biological mother is a celebrity. And the sad part is like, when I think I don't know if I uploaded the video, but I talked about when I was a kid, I made up this play about a woman who liked luxury, and she was like basically homeless, and she still like wore like expensive things like to the store and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, I'm a girly girl. I like dressing up for any occasion because it lifts my mood. But I'm not somebody who needs like furs and expensive perfumes. But this is what the story was about, right? Somebody who's just like um, really living it up. And, I remember visualizing her face in the thing. And that could have been a glimpse into the future for all I know. But anyway, with my new alien spread, I did get some messages, some more messages that I didn't ask for. But something made me think that maybe my sister Tanya, she might have been Diana Ross's child as well. She might have been. And I'm at a point right now where I don't even care if my siblings were my, connected. I don't care. To me, it's just like all that stuff is crazy to me. All of it. All of it. You know what I mean? And this is the reason why when I found out I was a clone and I was like associated with her and all this other stuff, I was like, oh shit, because I read about these people before, or these situations about cloning and all this other stuff. And I just really could not get onto it. I just think it's horrible. And I will tell you, a lot of these people have absolutely no morals, no moral compass whatsoever. And this just goes to show it. It's crazy. Okay, so I did get a message that a lot of these people, okay, what I'm talking about in the moral reset, I'm talking about things like the overly dependent. And I've mentioned this before. And I think, in order to have a functioning society, a society where we don't have too many people, I personally think it's not so much that there's too many people, it's too many bad people. How about that? There's too many people who are either ignorant or they're evil, basically. And so, I think, when I talk about the overly dependent, I'm talking about people like Diana Ross. I'm talking about people who get on welfare and think that it's a way of life, and they have all the intentions of slaving out. I'm gonna call it slaving out their kids. Okay, they're basically getting pregnant and having kids just so they can get welfare, and then have more kids so they can get welfare, and in this sort of stuff. Okay, people who abuse the system. Okay, not only are they abusing the system, but they're also, to me, they're abusing kids, because a lot of times, because they struggle and they aren't able to stand on their own and function. And run a regular household. Meaning, in order to run a household, you basically have to work. There's times where people, can be unemployed, and they might have to get on things like food stamps and have assistance and stuff like that. But some people, like, this is their life. And in order to raise a family consistently to where kids are going to be, raised up with feeling a sense of belonging, a feeling of stability. And yes, stability is important. If you can't provide for your kid, really people shouldn't have them. Okay. But this is what I'm saying. It's like, if people can't take care of their kids, then they shouldn't. Okay, but they also need to understand, I'm going to be talking about this in the more reset. If you find yourself in a situation where you ended up having kids and you really didn't plan on it, you need to figure out something and try to develop, try to understand and see it from the kid's point of view, because I cannot sit here and try to, like, tell people or encourage people that, because you're struggling to have some sort of emotion for your kid, or you might be open to abusing them if you get overwhelmed or whatever. We need to stop thinking that we can just throw kids away into the foster system, because we don't know if the foster system really is kind, loving, and protective. I remember some kids that I knew who grew up in foster care when I was a kid, and I will tell you, they looked pretty rough and beat up. Okay, some of these kids go through a lot in just foster homes, so at work, orphanages or whatever. And then I talked about people dropping off their babies in these hospitals, and we don't know where they go, or ended up having to be a victim of, domestic violence or whatever. We can't, people need to think about what they do before they do it. You know what I mean? Think about, are you in a position to give somebody a good home? Are you in a position to give somebody the kind of, emotional care that they need? Are you able, some people desire to be parents, and I'm saying give that responsibility to responsible people. That's what I'm saying. If you're not responsible, then you really shouldn't be having kids. But if you are in that situation, because I remember, when I was, when my son was really little, I used to have people come over to my house, and I knew a girl who was raising two boys, and those kids would come over and hang out in my apartment. And I remember she had, she loved and showed all kinds of affection to the littlest one, right? But she really struggled to feel any love for the oldest one. And I remember we were talking about, she came out and she admitted this, and she started crying, and I felt bad for her, but I kept thinking, and both of the boys had two different fathers. So there's reasons why people aren't able to take to one of their children. And I know people don't talk about this very often, but we need to talk about this. You know why? Because there's abuse that goes on. And she was one of those parents that would sit there and verbally abuse her kid all the time and whatever. And now that he's probably older, because that's been years, years have gone by, you know what I mean? And if he's no good to her, he might be homeless or whatever. I will tell you, I've seen the kind of foundation that a lot of these people give these kids, and I wouldn't really surprise me if that's exactly where he is right now. So it's important that we talk about these sort of things. And so maybe if a person has a cold heart and is not able to give their kid the love that they really deserve, maybe you need to understand, okay, their other option could be going off into some sort of void, could be going off to somewhere who's going to abuse them, could be going off into, a world where, it's going to be 10 times worse than living with you. So, people, and I would like to say these people probably do need some form of counseling. But like I said, and I've dealt with so many bad professionals. It's hard to sit there and say, well, consult a professional. I guess I'm going to say consult a professional. I'm just sorry. I've just dealt with garbage. And it could be the fact that I've been surrounded through, having, being in a part of a network that my mother, my biological mother, Diana Ross, was associated with. So of course my world is going to be very small, and I'm only going to have a certain select group of people to associate with anyway, because I was forced in her network. But I'm just going to tell you, a lot of people do not know how to handle these sort of situations, and people do not really address the topic of not having true feelings for their families. It's always been something that's swept under the carpet. I'm saying, well, you know what, since we're getting down to the root of the problem, that is the root of the problem. It is the root of the problem, is that we have a slave system. We have the make people our slave mentality. Just like, Diana Ross never did anything for me except for exploit me, okay? I'm sitting here broke, and she doesn't have a problem with sitting here in her mind thinking, okay, well, she can go get food stamps. Yeah, she can get food stamps. She cares about herself growing old, right? But she doesn't care about me growing old. And I'm sitting here trying to make plans for myself to be old. She didn't care. Okay? So this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people and their problems. If you're not in a position to, give life, support life, and be a good parent, then think about that before you actually do that. But if you're in this situation, maybe you need to think about being a little bit better of a parent before that poor child has to experience something worse. Anyway, so yeah, my alien spread. I think I found out some pretty cool things. I did find out that well, okay. I was walking down the street like yesterday. I went to the store, right? And I mentioned that, there was some construction going on over at the Mormon church, which made me think about a time where, I'd mentioned when we were really little, my parents took us to the Baptist church. It was a place called Olivet Baptist. And we didn't go there for very long. I think I only went there for maybe a year and a half. But my sister went there long after I left, and me and my sisters left, okay? And the reason why we stopped going is because my mother really didn't like having to, get us up, get us dressed, fed and all this stuff so we can go off on Sunday school. But I was, I kept thinking, okay, I don't know if they're going to end up demolishing what's going on over at that Mormon church, but I do remember the church that I left, I no longer belong to, that I thought it was kind of strange. And I remember me and my sister Tanya talking about that it was very strange that they would demolish a church. Like they would demolish a church. Because usually churches, even though it might, people might have to move out of it or something, they usually try to stick it out. Maybe somebody else will occupy it. Because really, when you think about it, a church is supposed to be kind of like a sacred space, right? But they straight up demolished it. Right? And so I've been asking questions like, did this have something to do with my sister? Because I think Tanya was also kind of targeted just because of her mental problems that she had. And so I had done some readings on that, and it was basically talking about a lot of sexism, a lot of abuse went on in that particular church. So yeah, I'm getting good information, on this spread. So I'm hoping I can add it. And see, I had come to find out, I wanted to know how long has cloning been, and I did talk about this in my videos, one of my videos about the cloning thing, about the real and all that other crazy stuff, okay? Cloning has been going on, according to my reading, it's been going on for quite a long time, okay? Like more than about 1,000 years, okay? So, I find this very fascinating, and I'm hoping that you guys will too. I had to design my cards myself, and I probably will share it, and you guys can experiment with it. I like working with stuff like that because it keeps me busy and it gives me something to do. But yeah, I'm talking about the alien races, the different alien races. Now this particular alien race, and I do understand that not all white people come from the same alien race. There's different ones, okay? Some white people are, like Pleiadians. Some are, what are they, Octorians. And then some are straight up grays. I would not be surprised, right? I would not be surprised if Rex was from the gray. Because some of the stuff that I experienced, it's just outright weird. I just felt like he was just very, very weird. But anyway, yeah, with chances are I'm going to put that in my newsletter. Anyway, yeah, but anyway, I am over the age of 18, and this is what, something so simple that I knew about, some legal information that I knew since I was a kid is what helps me navigate through life. If you are over the age of 18 and you don't know that you are responsible for yourself, if you don't know that no one else is responsible for another person who's over the age of 18, you need to know that. You know what I mean? For your own good. God knows what people can do to you when you don't know what your rights are. Anyway, so I'm glad that the dual affiliation thing is being addressed. I also have been getting the message that, I know that I do not want to come back here on this planet. I do understand, and I also have this one spread. Well, it's not really a spread. You're just kind of messing with the cards, okay? But it does say, it does indicate if you had you were at war with another alien group, or did you have an alliance with an alien group? A lot of the alien groups get along. They're able to work alongside of each other. But there are some alien groups that cannot work alone. They're very disruptive. They do not like, anybody who somebody is minding their own business. They feel compelled to literally stir things up that they cannot handle peace. They cannot deal with it. Okay, they're very destructive. But yeah, I'm hoping that you guys like that, and it's interesting to find out. And it's fun to experiment with these sort of forms of divination. But I'm glad that a lot of people are choosing heaven, and I am. I'm choosing heaven because, I realize, I'm an ancient being. I'm an ancient being. I've been around for a very, very long time, and it's the same stuff. I realized, okay, here are three of the things that I see. Okay, number one, and I'm creating these different definitions. Number one, in my past lives, I have been a peaceful strategist of war, meaning I'm not participating in the war, but I understand, like, every time somebody's trying to attack me, I always got a response for it. Why? Because I'm somebody who has been very law abiding, right? So that's one thing that I see. The other second thing that I see, or in my reading, was I was considered a writer and speaker of holiness. And the third one is that I am a healer of higher power and using herbs and stuff like that. Okay, and then I also did one for my father, and he was a writer and speaker of holiness as well. He was also a mystic, and he was also a peaceful strategic of war. I do believe that he had to use his peaceful strategies in talking to Olivet Baptist Church. I get this feeling that something was going on there that he had to deal with. And it might, if that turning point could have well been the part of where, his targeting started to increase. Because I truly remember a time when we were in, Lancaster, where things were not that hostile. Things were actually somewhat peaceful, right? Like, I remember my dad would walk in the stores and they would say, "Hi, hey, Jim." Hey, everybody was like, "Hey, Jim," they were nice and whatever. And then it seems like right around, okay, when I was in 5th grade, I think I stopped going to Olivet Baptist Church when around third grade, is somewhere around that time. But my sister Tanya continued to go. She continued to go to Olivet Baptist Church, and it's weird because my sister started to experience a lot of mental problems. Like, she had she had a paranoia episode where we had to have her put in a mental facility for a while. And do I think that was brought on by a church? Absolutely. That was brought on by the church. Okay, so it's not just the Mormon churches and all these people who participate in cloning and stuff like that. These people we've been attacked through different religious organizations for a very long time. Okay, and my sister experienced mental problems. So I remember my dad was really upset. My sister climbed out the window one night because she was afraid that somebody was going to get her. And she also said this, and this is back in the 80s. She said that the phone was tapped and people were listening in on her. Trip out, right? Yeah, this kind of church stuff. So that church ended up getting demolished not too long after all of that. And then my sister started going to another church, like a born-again Christian church, and this is where she met Jim. Now, I do believe, like, based on those readings, that Tanya is possibly my half-sister, okay? I believe that she might be Diana Ross's daughter as well. I do not know what clone Tanya is. I have no idea. I do not know what clone Tanya is. But I do believe that she is also Diana Ross's, or possibly another Diana Ross's daughter. And do I also believe that Diana Ross may have also been responsible, maybe, okay, because she may have been, having Tanya mobbed or being spied on or whatever. So, I'm not really that interested in digging into my sister Tanya, because I feel like it's time for me to forget my siblings. I think the reason why I was asking or wanting to know is because I didn't really think about, like, what was going on with Tanya at the Olivet Baptist Church at that time. I remember her telling me that people were ignoring her and treating her bad. one time, because Tanya, when I was younger, Tanya and I would spend time together. We'd go for walks and stuff like that. And when you're dealing with something like this, what I went through, you start dealing with a lot of flashbacks and memories. You start dealing with a lot of flashbacks and memories and thinking, okay, I remember we were talking about something. Does this have anything to do with what happened? And you know what? It does have a lot to do with it. You know what I mean? I realize how we've been targeted for a very long time. I do believe that perhaps maybe Jim Culligan may have had connections with Diana Ross throughout the years and me not even knowing it. Like I know that my sister Tanya met Jim when she was attending Antelope Valley College, and she met him, and they started dating, and that's when she changed churches, and I just remember, Jim was very starstruck. He was always interested in celebrities and stuff like that. And I do understand that Jeff Hughes, was also probably knew who we were and stuff like that. So, when I think about how orchestrated this is, you know what I mean? And it really is a kind of a form of human trafficking. Who's to say if Diana Ross did not send Jim Culligan to meet my sister? You know what I mean? This is the kind of childish stuff that they do. You know what I mean? What originally started off with something that was meant to be Mormon. They were so desperate to try to gain control of us that they even worked through different religious organizations, including things like, the Baptist Church. You know what I mean? Even though it's not consistent with their doctrine or whatever, this thing goes back so far. But anyway, yeah, it's sad. What else? I am going to be talking more about, the overly dependent in my newsletter, of course. And I don't feel bad about bashing her because some people need to be made an example of, okay? Some people do, okay? And I do understand that we have a lot of trafficked individuals, and these trafficked individuals are uncared for individuals. We have people who are created, and are being used and abused, okay? And some of these kids, are in our neighborhoods or whatever, but there's a lot of abuse, okay? There's like entirely too much abuse, and I think I'm not somebody who's saying, not have children. I've never said that. I'm just saying that's a job that should be left to people who are responsible. You know what I mean? I understand a lot of people want to promote having children, bring children onto the earth, and populate. And I understand. Especially if people have some sort of idea of wanting to preserve their heritage or whatever. But if you're not somebody who is mentally able or financially able or whatever, or you cannot give them some sort of stability, you might want to rethink that, okay? Because there's a lot of unhappiness on the earth already. Is there something else I want to say? Let me see. Let's see. Oh, I'm glad that people are excited about, getting rid of human trafficking, doing the best they can to end it, But that's really where it is. It's the dual affiliations, and it's also, hopefully that people will work, law enforcement will be more understanding about these sort of things. And then it's really also about the efficiency, like how quick are they responding? What are their different methods of doing it? I wish that I was never blacklisted or Diana Ross never messed with my reputation. She made it very difficult for people to cooperate with me, and this is by design. This is by design, okay? Like, shadow banning me or blacklisting me, or, I had mentioned one time when I had contacted a, one of those telemedics type things so that I can get on disability. The people on the phone, I believe, allow people to listen in on the conversation and all this other stuff. They think your life is a joke. It's not a joke, okay? And see, this is why it's wrong to do this sort of things, because if somebody really needed help, they aren't gonna be able to get it. But I never heard back from the Department of Human Trafficking about my inquiry, and that's really bad. It's not a good sign. So the very fact that I can't sit here and I'm going to list the Department of Human Trafficking's number and everything, But I also want the Department of Human Trafficking or these other organizations such as like domestic violence shelters or any sort of shelter really. They really do need to be able to understand that dual affiliation is not appropriate, especially when we're dealing with, because let's just say, for example, somebody's on a special list, on somebody's church list, okay? And they're doing this, they put her on a list, when I'm talking about a blacklist or a gang stalking list or whatever, and this woman could very well be trying to run from a man that's abusing her and she can't get out. So when she tries to go to like a shelter or whatever, these people are set and ready to abuse her as well because they have been instructed by their church or whatever. This has got to stop. Okay, it's got to stop. And this is, and the reason why I started thinking a lot about aliens. Why am I putting this together with aliens? I understand that a lot of this was, I was racially targeted. Okay, a lot of it's racial target, and a lot of it relates to religion and stuff like that. But it's the persistence of it, okay, that makes me think that there's something supernatural about it because it's like, okay, you ran through my sister Tanya's life, you ran through my life, you would not let go, you would not, it's almost like the dehumanization is just it's too intense. Okay, like it's beyond normal. Okay, I'm sure people can be a little bit nonchalant about other people's feelings or but this to me just seemed outright demonic. Okay, and for it to last that long, your lifelong targeting, it affects you everywhere you go and this sort of stuff. To me, yeah, it's something's deeper than that. So this is why I'm talking about, we're breaking it down to alien races. Okay, so anyway, I am looking forward, and yeah, when it comes to the religion and aliens, we do have different views on these sort of things. Okay, but I'm looking at it from a very peaceful standpoint. Like I said, there's alien races who are fine. There's either okay, alliances, meaning like, okay, I'm cool with you. You don't. But there's like, for example, this group of people that were targeting me, they cannot get along peacefully. They have a very difficult way or handling it. You know what I mean? That freaked me out. It's too much. It's abnormal. So the reason why I'm looking at aliens is because it's deeper. It's deeper than that. It's just a little too deep. So anyway, I am gonna wrap this video up, and I am feeling pretty like I'm bored is what it is. I'm bored, so I'm trying to get out of the house. Because I need to get out of the house. When it comes to dictating, or sorry, narrating my content, I only have one place to narrate it, which would be my room, okay? But right, if the house was cleaner, I would, or I had a nicer area. It's very difficult, but these people have created more problems for me. You know what I mean? It's like I'm very grateful that my son's here, but it's difficult because I'm used to living by myself. You know what I mean? These people have caused me nothing but problems. And they bothered me, and they had no right to. Okay, and so I'm hoping that people now understand when they see things like this that they will identify it as human trafficking. You know what I mean? I wish that the Department of Human Trafficking would have been able to, respond, and they need to be able to have an organization to where they respond quickly and promptly onto these sort of things. Even inquiries, because it could be in this case, because I'm talking about the Department of Human Trafficking or whatever, you can kind of consider me like maybe like a form of media or something like that, because I feel uncomfortable recommending people call a hotline number when I'm not sure if they are not some sort of underground operation for human trafficking. And I'm not saying that they are. I'm just saying is what I'm noticing about, and what I'm trying to talk and encourage things like law enforcement is if they do not have strong departments in these areas, okay, then they need to get strong. Okay, then you need to strategize something, okay? Because I don't ever want anyone having to deal with human trafficking again. I lost my life, the majority of my life, for people who are just absolutely narcissistic, borderline demonic. Okay, and this is why. And I get a feeling that there's a lot of people, okay, who are like, man, I wish I would have listened to her. I wish I would have listened to her. Well, the thing is that this stuff has been on the news before. Okay, just about everybody's heard of things like Charlie Manson. Just about everybody's heard about don't drink the Kool-Aid. We've all heard it, okay? But the thing is, people have a hard time identifying when they themselves are in that situation. And a lot of it has to do with the group mentality. The group can actually make people unfocused, and the feeling of connection, the feeling of oneness, the feeling of belonging, a lot of that gets played into the mind control, okay? But this is what I'm telling you. People need to be able to make these sort of decisions for themselves. They need to be able to stop. Next time you hear somebody talking about, hey, we're going to be doing this, or ignore this person, or they're trying to play some sort of covert action, you need to understand you should not participate in anything covert, okay? Even something small. The reason why? Because it's going to snowball into this. People thought that I was making a big deal about, complaining about me dealing with some of the employers. And I remember having people talking about, well, or saying that I was just too nitpicky, and I am not a nitpicker. I am one of the most coolest person to get along with when it comes to being laxed and laid back. I am totally laid back, okay? But there's reasons why these rules and laws are in place. You know why? Because it always snowballs into something like this, okay? Just if you're sitting here talking, one employer is talking to another employer about an employee or whatever, people start playing games and it's going to evolve into something sick. Guaranteed, every time. And then they threw the issue of religion in it. It just got explosive. And so now we have this whole issue that went all around the country, possibly all around the world, over this. And a work issue. Okay? So this is what I'm telling you. Okay, I am not somebody who makes things up just to be making them up or trying to be difficult. Because like I said, I am not a difficult person. For a 54-year-old person, I'm the most lax 54-year-old you can ever imagine. I don't have a problem with basically anything, except for this kind of stupidity. Because it needs to be recognized for what it is, and it should never, ever happen again. Okay, I'm going to wrap up this video, and hopefully I can get a little bit more interested in my day. I am so bored right now. I'm extremely bored. Oh, you know what? Somebody contacted me today and said that they were Elon Musk, and like I said, I do not want to sit here and get like, okay, is it really? I don't know. They sent me a little video clip of him talking, and I don't want to sit here and wonder about whether that's him or not. Okay, when and if he ever talks to me again, then he's going to have to do so in a way where there's no doubt in my mind. Okay, or I don't have to second guess it or whatever. I'm at a point where it's difficult for me to want to talk to people because I don't need people playing games. And like I said, it could have been him. But I'm just, unless of course I'm actually talking to him, like we can do a face-to-face on time or something like that. I cannot. I'm just not dealing with it. I only got on Facebook today because there's things I like. Sometimes I want to step away from what I'm doing. At this point, I was doing nothing because I was extremely bored and not really wanting to stand, by my computer and do narrating or whatever. So I got on Facebook, right? And when you're on Facebook, this is when I get a lot of people trying to reach me through Messenger and stuff like that. And so I saw this person, they were trying to contact me. And see, I would say that the times that I've spoken with these, I'm going to call them Elons, because it could be anybody, right? These Elons, I would think that he would remember like some of the questions that he asked me. So every time I encounter an Elon, they ask me the same question. So if he remembered me, he wouldn't be asking me these questions, right? So I get a little uncomfortable with that. So it's like, it's got to be consistent dialogue. I did send him an email from the original email that he sent me a while ago, and I have not heard anything from him. So I'm just chilling on all of this. But for now, I'm just working on my project, and I'm dealing with a lot of stagnation. I'm taking full responsibility of my work, meaning like my newsletter is mine, and I do know that they have used my stuff to make money on it. I do know that they have told people that I was I was like basically needing their consent and all this other stuff. Never believe that sort of stuff again. Okay, if anybody ever tells you so-and-so needs my permission to do this, ask them, why would the person need your permission as an adult? Ask them that question. And ask them, do you have a legal conservatorship of it? And is this person aware? Ask questions before you just, you know, accept it. Okay, because it's this sort of negligence or ignorance that has caused this whole issue. Okay, and hopefully it'll never happen again. Okay, so I'm wrapping up this video. I will be back with another video sometime later. Take care. Bye.